This review is brought to you in part by Ryder's Hobby Shops, where the fun begins. Stop in to one of Ryder's two convenient Michigan locations where you'll find a full range of the latest hobby products, supplies, parts, tools, and paint. This review covers the A5M2 Claude. It's a 172 scale kit from Hobby Boss number 80288. Now, it was given the Allied codename Claude, and the Mitsubishi Navy Type 96, which was the A5M, was a carrier-based fighter designed by Hiro Horikoshi, and he later designed the Zero fighter aircraft. Now, it featured a compact, lightweight design and great maneuverability for its time. In total, over 1,000 A5Ms were built before they stopped production. Now, its top speed was about 270 miles an hour, and it was armed with two 7.7 millimeter machine guns. It could also carry two Type 99 high explosive bombs and or a 42-gallon drop tank. In February of 42, it saw the first action and shot down three Douglas SBD dive bombers. The last action with it was in the Battle of the Coral Sea in May of 1942, when two of the A5Ms from the carrier Shoho fought against U.S. aircraft that had sank their carrier. In the closing months of the war, many of the remaining A5M airframes were used for kamikaze attacks. Now, opening the box, I was surprised by the lack of parts, but impressed by the quality of the moldings with recessed panel lines, no flash, and nice surface detail. The kit only has about 20 parts molded in light gray and clear, and the upper fuselage is molded as one piece, as is the lower, along with the complete wing and tail assembly. Now, the wing and fuselage came firmly attached to cardboard sheets to prevent damage, and the canopy was wrapped in foam for the same reason. For less than $15, I thought it was a bargain, and a great model for the beginner. When you're done, the finished dimensions are about 6 inches long, 4 inches wide, and 1 3/4 inches high. The kit comes with two decal options. One is the silver one on the box art, which was assigned to the aircraft carrier Soryu, and an aircraft that was camouflaged brown and green with upper surfaces and silver undersides, and that was used in the Chinese area. Construction begins with the three pieces that make up the simplified cockpit, and once the seat and the floor were together, I painted them and the inside of the upper fuselage half Tamiya cockpit green, which is IGN color number XF71. Now, the control stick was painted flat black and the boot brown to represent a leather boot, and then when it was dry, add the control stick. Now, this assembly is then inserted and glued into the wing half of the fuselage casting. Once the assembly was set and dry, it was simply a matter to glue the upper fuselage half to the lower wing section, and I was surprised there was hardly any seam at all. A very small seam then was quickly filled with a little perfect plastic putty, wiped down with a moistened Q-tip, and no sanding was needed. Next up was to clean up and assemble the main landing gear parts, and the wheel spats are made of two halves and the tires inserted between them in a sandwich manner, and the spats needed a little bit of cleanup as the pour stubs you see indicated here are pretty large, and the locating points are a little too large for a good clean fit. So I also did another little bit of extra work on the kit, which was to drill out the exhaust stacks for more realism. Now, my one minor complaint about the whole kit and engineering it was that the one-piece exhaust stack ring must be inserted into the cowling before the cowling can be attached to the fuselage, which kind of limits your ability to detail it. Now, I painted the wheels, the tires I should say, with some rubber black and sandwiched them in between the spats, which are painted silver. Now, those are, attached, and once I had also sprayed, the rest of the lower section silver. After it dried, I masked it off and used some tape and some plastic bags. And then I discovered it would have been easier not to attach the landing gear and the cowling stacks first
But my thinking was that the upper cowling is to be painted with the two-tone camouflage, and it'd be easier. But I think I would have left those off if I were to do that again. Once the lower silver surfaces were masked off along with the cockpit area and the cowling, I gave the model airframe a nice overall couple of coats of 1701 brown from Model Master, and then once that was dry, I gave it a coat of Future floor polish. That's the changed its name brand every couple years, stuff that gives it a nice sheen for decaling. It's also almost necessary if you plan to use liquid mask, which is a microscale type product, for outlining some of the camouflage. To get it off of flat surfaces, it really sticks. So the Future really helps in that regard. As is always the case, something happens, and you see here something had gotten into the Future clear coat, so I had to sand it off and then respray the brown and the clear coat and let it dry. Once that had cured, I outlined the wavy camo pattern using the micro mask, and then I used a little regular painter's tape to fill in the areas in the center. But once on the fuselage, I covered then the main brown area using only a liquid mask, which has a flat finish, so that you can kind of see where the camo demarcations are on the fuselage. So the liquid mask instructions say to put it on pretty heavily because it's easier to remove that way. Now once the green was dry, the model was once again given a clear coat of Future in preparation for decals. Oh, and at this point I also added the canopy and the gun sight. The decals for the kit are pretty simple, but they come off the paper easily and go into place. You may need some setting solution to get it to conform to the contours on the airframe, but there's only 6 of the Hinomaru red circles, and then as you can see there's 2 on the fuselage, 2 on the top and bottom wings, and then there's also a tail code for either side of the vertical stabilizer. Once the decals have dried, and it's best to let them dry overnight, then the final step here was to mask the canopy once more and then spray the upper surfaces with some Tester's dull coat, and with that your airframe construction is finished. Well, looking very much like an A5M2 Claude, this airframe is ready for takeoff, and as you can see, it's a pretty good representation of the actual plane. Now obviously it doesn't have any of the internal details you'd find in more expensive kits, but if you're looking for something to put on your shelf that looks like the Claude, this is pretty reasonable, and you can make it look very much like one of the real things, at least from the outside. Now, if I were you, I'd buy one and build it with a youngster and then put it on my shelf.